Hello, everyone. My name is Serafi, and it is Wednesday, my dudes! And we are back. It's been a minute. Sorry about that, guys. I had a few guests last week, and so I had to make some time for them and some time to edit that video. But now we can get back to what's really important Wednesday. And this Wednesday is not just any Wednesday, it is the 10th episode of Wild Card Wednesdays. So, to celebrate us reaching this milestone, I decided to take a look at the premier Wind deck. Now, the name of the deck and the cards that exist in this deck probably evoke a certain reaction. You might think, Serafi, this is cancer. Serafi, I just got stage 4 cancer from looking at your deck list. Serafi, it skipped stages 1 through 3 and took me all the way to stage 4. Serafi, your list is speedrunning killing me with cancer. Yes, that's correct. So this is Floowandereeze with Necrovalley. Now, I'm not going to go over the idea of Floowandereeze because the reason that Floowandereeze keeps getting hit on the ban list is because if you've played Master Duel, it's everywhere. This is a deck that will not die, no matter how many times Konami nerfs it. It has its boss monster limited to 1, and it still is a force that you have to deal with in the meta. So, when we have all these cards limited, when we have only 1 copy of Floowandereeze and M-Pen, when we have only 1 copy of Magnificent Map, we need more cards. We need there to fill out this 40-card deck list. So I thought, what is the best way to make a true control lockdown deck? Is it Rivalry with Warlords? Is it there can only be 1? No. I decided that to truly make people hate themselves, the best course of action was Necrovalley. Now, for those of you who don't know what Necrovalley does, don't worry, no one knows what Necrovalley does. It is the most confusing card in the entire game. Let's go over it real quick. All Gravekeeper's monsters gain 500 attack and defense points. That is irrelevant. Cards in the graveyard cannot be banished. Oh boy. So that is a real kick in the nads, and we'll get to that in a second. Negate any card effect that would move a card in the graveyard to a different place, and negate any card effect that changes types or attributes in the graveyard. Now, the reason why Necrovalley is such a frustrating card is because it is not once per turn, and it is also not a card that negates the activation of effects. It simply negates effects. What does that mean? It means that this card can negate cards who state that the activation of their effects cannot be negated, and also cards that would outspeed this. This card can negate counter traps, despite it being a spell speed 1 card. It's not reacting. It doesn't start a chain. It negates the effect on resolution, which is a very weird interaction. And really, they should never have put any negates on a field spell, but at the very least, cards like Abyss Actor, Fantastic Playhouse, they make more sense in terms of the stack and in terms of resolutions and in terms of once per turn. Necrovalley is just, it literally changes so many ways that the game functions, and it's so frustrating. So let's talk about a deck that's really popular in the meta, which is Dragon Link. If you're playing against Dragon Link and you play Necrovalley, let's say that your opponent, in the middle of their 6-turn combo, forgets that Necrovalley is on the field, or maybe they haven't read it. And so they try to use one of their best cards, which is the Chaos Ruler. Okay, so they have Chaos Ruler out, and they Synchro Summon, and Chaos Ruler is now in their graveyard. Well, Chaos Ruler says, If this card is in your graveyard, you can banish one light and one dark monster from your hand and or graveyard except this card. Special summon this card from your graveyard, but banish it when it leaves the field. You can only use each effect of Chaos Ruler, the Chaotic Magical Dragon, once per turn. So the reason I picked this card is because it highlights both aspects of Necrovalley. So here's the thing. Necrovalley says to negate the effect that would move a card in the graveyard. But since it's an effect that's being negated, it doesn't prevent you from doing it. That means you can still activate that effect, which means that this little card right here, if it's in the graveyard, will be lit up in your graveyard. So you will want to click on that because, click on everything that's lit up, right? Here's the thing, though. This part right here, cards in the graveyard cannot be banished. This is a hard rule. It does not negate a card that would banish a card. It says you can't banish them. So here's the thing that a lot of people who don't play D-Link don't know. This card banishes from the hand or the graveyard. So let's say that you were a Dragon Link player and you want to go ahead and play your Chaos Ruler, and you have one light and one dark monster in your hand. Well, if your Necrovalley is out, you can activate this card's effect, and oh no, you look at all those cards in your graveyard, all those juicy light and dark monsters in your graveyard that don't really mean anything to you, and you can't banish them. But you can't stop Chaos Ruler's effect now that you've declared it. So you are forced to turn around and banish two cards from your hand because you chose to activate the effect without remembering that you couldn't banish the cards in your graveyard. You banish the two cards from your hand, and the Necrovalley negates the effect anyway. So now you've wasted your once per turn revive, you've lost two cards out of your hand, and you don't get your monster back. And that's all from this one card. And it's still going. Both of those effects are still active until Necrovalley leaves the field. This is an incredibly frustrating card. And when you combine it with Dimension Shifter, which is a card that you're all familiar with because Flu already uses this card, this also prevents cards being sent to the graveyard. So these two cards lock your opponent's graveyard down so hard. And the important thing is, you have so many ways to get Necrovalley, because Necrovalley Throne adds a Gravekeeper monster from your deck to your hand. And the Gravekeeper monster you're going to add is Gravekeeper's Commandant, which you can discard to add Necrovalley from your deck to your hand. And Gravekeeper's Commandant is not once per turn, which means that it's a fantastic card to bait Ash Blossom with, because you could discard this card, your opponent will Ash it, then you can play Throne, draw another copy of Commandant, discard that, still get your Necrovalley, and you've just dug through your deck so much. And this is just a fantastic card to combine with the boss monster of Floowandereeze, Floowandereeze and M-Pen, which is also a card that completely stops your opponent from doing anything. Because while this tribute summoned card is in the monster zone, your opponent cannot activate the effects of special summon monsters they control in attack position. They can't activate those effects. Again, this is a situation where even if the card says this effect cannot be negated, it still can't activate. So in order to try and avoid all the M-Pen negations, your opponent's going to have to constantly special summon in defense mode, which means, first of all, they can't link summon, because link summon can only be done in attack position, and the monsters that they summon out, if they try to remove M-Pen, are going to be in defense position, and they can't actually attack even if they clear your field. So even if your opponent, let's say your opponent's playing Resonators, instead of going into something like Red Supernova Dragon, they will go into something like Dark End Dragon and use its effect to send Floowandereeze and M-Pen to the graveyard. And by doing so, and playing that in defense position, they have gotten around your negates and you're messing with people. But they have played suboptimally while doing that. So to get through these floodgates, your opponent is going to have to make bad plays. They're going to have limited options. And if they make any mistakes at all, they get heavily, heavily punished. What does this result in? In a best of one format, it results in what I call salt mining. My good buddy, Chrome, who you all met in my last video, actually built this deck because he's the Gravekeeper guru. He had all these Gravekeeper cards already. And he went into Plat and went on a 7-game win streak with this deck. And only one of those games was played to completion. 6 people in Plat, when they saw Floowandereeze running Necrovalley, just said, fuck this. and they surrendered. That is a viable strategy to climb in a best of one format. If you could just make people hate you so much that they don't want to play the game, you can legitimately farm wins with that and climb. And that's what this deck is all about. It is about farming wins by making your opponent not want to play the game anymore. We got 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. We got 3 copies of the card that lets you tribute your opponent's cards during their turn. It's just, it's 3 Ash Blossoms, 3 Maxis, just every card that would make your opponent say, I don't want to play the game. And then you just, when they leave, you win. More stars, Master 5 easy. I challenge all of you to build this deck because it's so cheap. Look at this. We've got 3, 6 URs that you already have, 2 Dimension Shifters, 1 Apex Avian, 3 Necrovalleys, 3 Imperms, which you already have, and 1 Adventure. That's it. And then the rest is super rares, neutrals, and rares. Like this is part of the problem that Konami's been having with Flu, is that it's so ridiculously cheap. By the way, there's no extra deck because you don't need an extra deck. You don't special summon in Flu. No one special summons in Flu. The 15 card extra deck in Floowandereeze is Cope. Do not run an extra deck in Floowandereeze. That's cringe. Run Necrovalley instead. That is not cringe. Thank you very much for joining me as we look at a wind deck that will blow your opponent away. This is Serafi. I was thrilled to have you all with me.